My name is Nancy Patch. I'm the co-founder of Cold Hollow to Canada, and I'm also a retired forester who spent the last 17 years of my career working with an extension forestry. So my overlap with my professional career and my passion for the work I do was valuable. Cold Hollow to Canada is a really small grassroots conservation organization. We have one full-time staff and one 10-hour-a-week staff. So we are tiny, but we have a big goal and we believe we have a big impact. So we're really excited today to be able to introduce you to the work that we do. And I'll turn it over to Dave for his introduction.
Hey everybody, thank you Peregrine so much for this wonderful experience and journey for us. It's so humbling, honestly, to go after all of these presentations. We're by far the smallest group here, and which is also really exciting. So we've learned a ton. So I'm Dave Erickson, like Nancy said. At the beginning of this year, I became the first executive director of Cold Hollow Canada, as well as the first full-time employee. So our capacity has expanded a lot. Our vision is for a resilient and connected ecosystem across the entire ecoregion, supported through permanent protection, sustainable stewardship, and engaged local communities. And we do that with a mission that is to maintain ecosystem integrity, biological diversity, and forest resiliency throughout the Cold Hollow to Canada region, with a focus on community-led stewardship and the conservation of our working landscape in the face of a changing climate. And this really just demonstrates what we're trying to do here. This is the landscape we're working to steward and protect. Many of the projects we're going to review later are in this image.
So, like I said, we're real small, as I mentioned in my introduction, but we really recognize that the work that we do truly has a global impact. So people are familiar with this vision, but this is the Northern Appalachian Acadian Wabanaki ecoregion, which is the most intact broadleaf temperate forest in the world. I say that to everyone all the time. You should hear the people that work with us, the audience. Well, where do we live? And they can respond. So this is a globally significant forest. It covers 4 provinces, 5 states. And it also is a place where more people live than any other forest of this type. So for that reason, it's at great risk of losing its ecological function. So many years ago, 2 Countries, 1 Forest, and then the Staying Connected Initiative identified a variety of different connectivity linkages that are essential to maintain in order to keep the integrity of this forest intact. We live and work in the Northern Green Mountain linkage. That's where Cold Hollow to Canada is located. Move it on to the next. And so this, zooming in, we do like to start big, zoom in. We'll keep going smaller and smaller, where you can see the work that we do. But the Northern Green Mountain linkage is one that is transborder. Most of it, or a little bit more than half of it, is in the U.S., in Vermont, and then into Quebec, where our partners, the Appalachian Corridor Association, works. So we have a transborder region, but it also connects to the east across a series of different linkages, so that we expand this whole connectivity, vision of a connectivity across the region. The Cold Hollow Canada region is smaller still, and it is just a portion of the Northern Green Mountain linkage. But I'd like to highlight here one of the things that if you can see that the green is protected land, is conserved landscape with easements. And in our region, which covers the spine of the Northern Green Mountains and into the Champlain foothills, is one of the least protected areas of that linkage. So this is smaller down to the actual Cold Hollow to Canada boundaries. The boundaries are political town boundaries, and we did that kind of out of ease and being able to work with communities. But we chose this landscape primarily because it's all along the western slopes of the Northern Green Mountains and includes 2 watersheds that feed into Lake Champlain. So there's a real ecological reason for looking at these particular 7 towns. And the reason it's as small as it is we looked at our own capacity. We started out with a volunteer board, no staff. And so what are we going to do? How are we going to work in this region and have an impact? This is a very rural landscape here. It's primarily forested, and there's probably 10,000 people who live across these 7 towns. So we are in a place that's still pretty wild. It's also a place where the forest economy is prevalent. So we're looking at the timber industry, forest products industry, maple syrup, big time maple syrup where we live. Can't compare with Quebec, I know, but we're small. And also recreation is hugely important in this area. So we are working within our community to find the ways to move this forward and to protect it into permanence.
Thanks, Nancy. So the challenge that Cold Hollow Canada is working on is not lost on anyone in this room. And this graph here really demonstrates an amazing story here. So the forest cover in Vermont declined from 95% and then all the way down to only 20% from European settlement and land clearing activities. But then it rebounded from some changes in land use and economics all the way back to 80%, really demonstrating the regenerative, resilient nature of this system. However, it is now experiencing another decline. A recent estimate has that decline at over 12,000 acres per year. I just had to do the conversion because I don't think this way, but that's almost 5,000 hectares. And so that decline is really what we are working on at Cold Hollow Canada right now, is thinking about this. Now, this trend is being driven by parcelization that's leading to fragmentation, that's being driven by poorly planned development that's fragmenting the forest from roads and housing development. And this pattern is really prevalent in other places of Vermont, but it's really coming our way for a lot of reasons that we can go into. It's also being amplified by climate change. Vermont, like much of the region, is experiencing twice the temperature rise as the rest of the global average. That's leading to extreme weather events. We've had a lot of big-time flooding in the last few years. And there's also a lot of other environmental stressors that are being compounded by this. Invasive plants, introduced forest pests. That's having many impacts that is really going to be in our face for many years to come and impacting future generations. So the simple way, again, we're small, but the simple solution that Cold Hollow Canada is working on is, in our area, is keeping forest as forests through managing for climate resilience, biodiversity, and sustainable uses, as well as protecting existing forest land. So that's really the focus of our project. And our approach to doing this is through 3 primary pillars: community empowerment, sustainable stewardship, and forest land conservation.
So just a little history here. We started in 2009, and how we began, as I said, we're grassroots. So we just invited a bunch of folks that we knew were conservation friendly. We invited about 50 people to a first meeting just to talk about the dilemma that we're facing, a global dilemma, but looking at the ecoregion and what part we might have to play in our own backyards. So we asked everyone at that meeting to come to another meeting shortly after, but to bring a friend. So now we have 100 people in our room. And those 100 people in our room, we gave them maps. And we said, okay, what we want you to do is just to identify the things that you love about this place. So we were getting those first ideas about what place is and what people love. And we have a motto at Cold Hollow Canada that you only see what you know, you only love what you see, and you only protect what you love. So this is the message that we're putting out to our community. We've done a lot of work with supporting towns. We actually helped form 3 conservation commissions in our 7 towns. One was already existing. We've also helped towns develop their own town-wide conservation funds so that they go to their constituency and ask them to contribute through taxes to the fund that they can be used in their own communities. We've also worked with towns in how to incorporate the protection of forest and conservation within town planning and subdivision regulations. So we've been involved with the community at different levels of government. Our community science program has been incredibly successful in getting people to see things on the ground that they may not have seen before. We've been doing tracking skill training for about 13 years, and we've trained more than 50 volunteers that are regularly going out into the landscape to do some tracking and finding out where the animals are living. And we have more than 50 game cameras out as well, gathering up, monitoring information. And this just is a great way to get the community involved in what we're doing and understanding what conservation is about and why we want to do it. It's bringing that love of place again back into the discussion. Our second pillar that is so important to the work that we do is sustainable stewardship. This is something that we spend a lot of time with in our work. We understand that conservation, permanent conservation, is one means, but that landscape will need to be managed managed well, and we are able to do that through the discussions that we have with the community. Our woodlots program is it's a signature program for Cold Hollow Canada. It's what we're probably known for most across the region. This is a peer-to-peer landscape stewardship program where we have 5 different groups that cover the 7 towns. And the landowners get together 4 times a year to walk each other's property, to learn from each other, and to learn from resource professionals that may have answers to the questions that they have. So it's a way for people to learn from each other, to see demonstrations on the landscape. We spend a lot of time with stewardship activities, primarily non-commercial activities, restoration projects on the landscape that when people aren't used to doing forest management, this is a great gateway. It's a great way to bring people onto the landscape to understand what they're doing is actually enhancing and helping the rest of the community. Audubon Vermont is one of our partners, and they do a habitat assessment of everybody's property on the landscape to start with, so they have that, and then we work with enhancing bird habitat. So you can see the list, it's a long list. But the thing that's been so beautiful about this program is that it's been wildly successful in getting people to love their land. And when they love their land, they're going to protect it. So at this point in time, about 1/3 of the properties that are part of our woodlots program have permanent conservation easements on them. And within the next 2 years, in our active projects, that'll go up to about 50%. So we know that this kind of a program works really well. Our partners know that this is a kind of program that works really well. We are able to bring the projects to the table that they can, and we help landowners walk through the process of conservation.
So forest land conservation's and achieving a goal that we set is really our primary focus with the Peregrine program and the funding that we're seeking. So when Cold Hollow Canada first started, about 17 years ago, we looked at the amount of conserved forest land within the highest priority habitat blocks. And as you can see, the Cold Hollow Canada region is really defined by large, relatively intact forest blocks. And that outer boundary includes the forest blocks that overlap that 7-town region. So that's really where we're working in our conservation work. So that goal was set to conserve and double that acreage to conserve an additional 23,000 acres by 2030. or 9,600 hectares. And the role we play here is, one, based on those other pillars, is really bringing trust to the table. Trust with the landowners that we work with, the community members that we work with, the partnerships that we've developed, where we really serve as a nexus between the communities and the members and those larger conservation groups to do strategic conservation, to protect those forest blocks and the connectivity between them, as well as the other really important features to biodiversity in this region. This is guided by Vermont Conservation Design, a statewide conservation plan. The work we're doing is primarily focused on conservation easements, and it also is contributing to statewide goals in the Community Resilience and Biodiversity Protection Act, Act 59 in Vermont, that fits within that global framework that was developed right here in Montreal to conserve and protect 30% of the lands and waters of this planet by 2030 and 50% by 2050. So being that nexus, this hourglass image of Cold Holiday Canada, the flow of information and work between grassroots communities and partners, through that role, we help navigate the complexities of conservation. One of the major barriers to conservation for many in our area is cost. Conserving land comes with a lot of transaction costs, a lot of expense. And so what we did a few years back is develop a conservation fund that we hold to help offset costs for projects. And it also is utilized to leverage other grant funds. And this conservation fund has been a real accelerator for our 23,000 acre goal. And it started out slow, but over the years, we've really made some serious progress. And these are logos of all the different partners that we're working with right now on projects, from statewide and regional land trusts to national conservation groups to state agencies to federal agencies. So we're convening all of these different partners right now and working on many different projects with them. So this is the land protection map of our area. The blue is land that was conserved when Cold Hollow to Canada started. The red are projects that have closed since that we count towards our goal. The yellow are projects that we are actively coordinating and moving to the finish line. And the hatched represents projects that are being supported by the Conservation Fund. And some of those yellow projects are going to be in need of that Conservation Fund as well. So we've already completed 42% of this goal. Being a really tiny little nonprofit, we're really amazed by that, honestly. We've got another 25% underway. And to close that gap, if that 25% all closes, which we hope it will, we've got 33% to go to get to our 2030 goal, to double the amount of strategic conserved forest land in our region, to go beyond 30 by 30. And we really set this goal before a lot of others in Vermont were doing this. So we feel like we've been a strong leader in this regard. So we're going to go for a couple quick examples here of how we work. So the yellow are projects that we're working to close right now. The red is a project that recently closed. The blue, again, is land that was already conserved when Cold Hollow started. So this cluster right here really shows one way that we work, which is using that peer-to-peer, neighbor-to-neighbor, those connections to bring together folks to move through this process together. That's been a really powerful way to get this work done. We're also using our conservation fund to leverage many different grant sources. The Vermont Housing and Conservation Board has been a big supporter of this work and is a strong partner to us right now. And then we're working with many different partners. So from the Vermont Land Trust to the New England Forestry Foundation to the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is part of the federal government in the US. So not only are we helping nonprofit partners conserve land and using our funds to do that, we're also coordinating with federal partners to conserve land through programs that they offer and walking landowners through that process. And this is all trying to improve the forecast for ecological connectivity in our area. And we're also working with a lot of other landowners that fill in the gaps around this map. So we're really trying to stitch together this landscape and build land protection and corridors of land protection so that the forests of this region can continue to function, wildlife can move, and that local communities can have a forest-based economy. Zooming out a little bit, we were just down in this little corner here. So again, using our conservation funds, we've been able to leverage significant grants to complete projects. This was a large sugar bush project that just closed. That's really anchoring the northern tip of this large forest block. And we also are supporting donated conservation easements and working with a ton of different partners to coordinate this work. From large forest legacy projects being led by the Trust for Public Land, but we've again brought landowners to the table, to our land trust partners, to our federal partners, to small river-based projects that also are really important for connectivity in this landscape. And again, trying to create long-term, durable connectivity through conservation. So in the last 2 years, this is just an example of how we've used the Conservation Fund, but working with the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, we've put about $43,000 into projects that have raised a significant amount of money to complete these easement projects, leveraging $32 for every dollar that we put in and protecting 28 acres with every dollar we put in. And overall, our conservation fund, we started out with $182,000. Originally, we were putting money towards Vermont Land Trust projects in kind of lump sums, but as we've become more involved in these projects, we're now coordinating a lot of these efforts. A lot of the funds are going to surveys, appraisals, and stewardship endowments. And we spent almost all of it to help protect over 5,000 acres, and we've got enough remaining for 1 or maybe 2 projects. And our partner from the New England Forestry Foundation was just out a couple days ago, meeting with a couple landowners that we, again, made that connection, and so that's probably where those funds will go. So this is just kind of a tracking our progress here. We've made huge strides, and we're trying to get to the end here so that we can really demonstrate not only, the need for 30 by 30, but the power of a local grassroots model like Cold Holiday Canada to advance this work. So to continue our momentum, over the next year, we're going to really work hard to replenish and expand this fund. We're also going to be aligning ourselves with our conservation partners. One of the things that we've been doing over the last couple of years is really extending their capacity, and then going back out and talking with the landowners that have expressed interest in conservation, which currently represents 36 properties and about 10,000 acres that are interested and potentially ready to move forward. And then we're also, through our other pillars and work we've done with Peregrine, work Nancy and I are doing with our board, really working on community engagement involving as many perspectives and voices that we can in this work in our little small corner of Vermont. So what we think we need is to essentially more than double what we had before and add some capacity into that. Like Nancy introduced us, we've been very small, volunteer driven. Now we've got some staff. If we're gonna get to our end goal, we need to raise some more funds. We estimate we need about $500,000 to protect that remaining gap of about 8,000 acres. That could support 30 or more projects. Like others had mentioned, our region is really small family forest owners, and so it takes an effort of bringing together many people to protect this landscape. And so our funding plan is to seek large donations from foundations or donors. We're working to create an annual business sponsorship program to bring in some capacity funding. So to get to 2030, what we're proposing is a $500,000 boost to our conservation fund and some additional capacity funding to get us to the end goal. Yeah.
So I just want to finish this up by saying something about our organization which makes us so different from most others is that we're not easement holders, and we don't own land in fee. What we are is boots on the ground. The people, we are who the people trust. We have built relationships over more than a decade, and people really, they feel comfortable. We've demonstrated what stewardship looks like. We've demonstrated what conservation looks like, and people are willing to go forward in protecting this landscape that they've learned to love even more than when they first either purchased or inherited their land. So I do think that our partners have recognized the value of our organization. In doing so, they've provided us with capacity that allowed us to bring on Dave full-time, which was a true game changer. He first came on as a conservation program director, and then now has come full-time. This is essential to get the work done. When we think about Vermont and the idea of 30 by 30 in Act 59, this can only be done by conserving smaller properties. And so conserving smaller properties takes a lot of time and effort. And so we're here. Dave has the skill, the capacity. We have the knowledge and the connections to provide our partners with assistance. So our partners are gaining a great deal from the work that we do, and really have given us an incentive that they would like to see more of us, more organizations like us, because we're so small. But the fact that you're small, you know your people. So a lot of small organizations like us could make a big, giant difference. So we have value. Our partners have recognized that value and are supporting us. And so now we're going out with the help of the Peregrine Accelerator Grant, has really focused our thinking about how to move forward with more of a dynamic fundraising plan, and to actually go forward and make the ask. Another thing about being small is we didn't have the capacity for fundraising. We didn't have the experience for fundraising. It's a scary thing to go out and ask for money. And so now, with your help, and your demonstration and of all the work that you all have done is very inspirational to move us forward. Thank you.
Your ratios are pretty impressive. As you guys grow, have staff costs, some of the low-hanging fruit maybe of the early landowner partners that you've engaged, do you sort of expect that to go down a little bit? Do you sort of see cost and effort being higher as you get to the closer to your goal?
Yeah, I think costs are getting higher just through the complexity of conservation. That certainly is a part of the concern. But I do think our project pipeline is definitely going up. There's, you get to a certain point with conservation in a community, and people get it, right? So now we have a pretty strong pipeline. We're quite clear that we can meet our goal by 2030 if we just have the amount of funding to actually leverage those other grants and to bring that other money in. Because clearly $500,000 isn't enough to do the work by itself. But we are not doing the work by ourselves. We're doing it in partnership.
Thanks, Nancy and Dave. At risk of repeating myself from earlier comments, just another great, inspiring story. And I think you're too modest to say it, but having known Cold Hollow, Canada, and been an admirer for a long time, I think "small but mighty" is the catchphrase from my perspective. And it's really exciting to see the way the vision in the organization continues to evolve, and with still modest paid capacity, but with this incredible network of relationships that you have, and the outcomes that's already yielded, and the position that it puts you in for more progress going forward, I think is something. It's a great example, I think, of conservation at the speed of trust, really. So I guess I was struck too by some of the ratios, and it strikes me, if I'm doing the math right, if you're looking to raise another 500,000 to go after about 10,000 acres, maybe a little less, but that's like $50 an acre. Is that right? And knowing that there are other costs that aren't going to be covered by the 500,000, as you just said, but I mean, strikes me that that's an incredible ROI for any investor, and that 500,000 is a really modest amount of money to be looking for to achieve the impact that you're working towards. That's part of this bigger vision that ties into state, regional, and international goals. So I'd encourage you to not be bashful about really hitting on that ROI for modest investment. And then I guess I just have a question at the end on one of the last slides. When you were digging into those numbers a little bit, you had a line on there about $20,000 annual business sponsorships, if I caught it right. And I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit more about what that consists of, who your targets are, what your, if you had any success so far, what do you see the trajectory being on that? Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really designing and developing that. It's been a conversation of cold hollows for a long time, but we haven't really had the capacity to put it together. But a perfect example is, we have a pretty significant ski area in our region, Jay Peak, which many of you probably know. We think that's going to be a great partner in that program. There's also a lot of small local businesses, a lot of forest product businesses in and around the cold hollow region. So we're going to try to really put together a program next month, basically, of trying to attract some business sponsors to, one, support community events that are free and available to everyone, but then use that as a way to really support our capacity and bring in some additional funding every year. And again, I think as you saw and you noted, we're all about leverage. If we can bring in $20,000 a year from business sponsors, then we think we can use that to go out and leverage more funding that we might need to expand our capacity going forward.
One of the things that we've found, as you can see, being such a small geographic footprint, where does the money come from? It doesn't really come from within the 7-town region. There's not, the money isn't all there. So one of the things that it's always concerned us is how do we convince someone from outside the region to invest in our region? And I think we've found the way to get there. I think what we do is we've demonstrated the value of the work that we do. One of the things I failed to mention about the Woodlots program is because it was sought after by so many people. How do you do this? How do you do this? We put together a Woodlots toolkit that's open source and on our website. And we have consulted with multiple different organizations about how they can develop their own version of it. It's not prescriptive. It is just an assistance. And people can make their own version of woodlots. And we really do think that that's one of the things that is translatable and replicable. And I think that replicating the work that we do over and over in different parts of the region would be worthwhile bringing us to our successful end in 2030 when we have 23,000 acres conserved. Sure, we're going to do it.
So this idea about 2030, right? I stand to be corrected, but at the biosphere, I think it was about 5 years ago now, the federal government invited Native people. I was part of that process when they made this announcement of maintaining 30% biodiversity by the year 2030. That's the first time I heard that, like here in Canada. And I know some of what you're talking about is in Vermont. But like that idea is people in the United States, actively trying to buy into that concept too?
Oh, yes, definitely. It's part of, in Vermont, we just passed legislation to actually make that happen. And one of the things, Cold Hollow to Canada, as Dave said, we were saying we were going to do that before we heard the rest of the world talking about it. We also were one of the first organizations to put a number on what we wanted to conserve. Generally, conservation at that time was more opportunistic, and whatever showed up, showed up. We said we want to double the conservation efforts and get to 23,000 acres. And we were also very instrumental in the dialogue that brought Act 59 to be, for the legislation in Vermont to happen and developing with the plan. So people did come to us, our tiny little group, to ask us, what we thought about it.
And I'll say too that through the process in Vermont with the 30 by 30, they've looked at the conserved land in Vermont and where it is, and have identified some serious gaps of where that land is being conserved. One of those gaps is in that Champlain foothills, that region between the lake and the higher mountains. And so we've really focused some of our efforts. That first map of properties that I showed you was in that region. And so we're trying to focus our efforts to meet that challenge, to conserve land in that kind of real stepping stone to that higher elevation, and fill that gap.
Okay, we can keep talking, but we've had a lot of assistance from our partners over the years, and some of that work has been in strategic planning for how do we go about our conservation efforts. And the state of Vermont, Department of Fish and Wildlife, was instrumental in helping us move that forward. And Staying Connected Initiative has been incredibly helpful as well in looking at what our strategic planning may look like. So we've had a lot of help from our partners, and we expect that's just going to continue. Well, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.